There's a theory that refuses to disappear. It whispers through quantum physics labs, lingers in the minds of cosmologists, and keeps philosophers awake long after the equations stop making sense. The idea is unsettling, that everything you've ever experienced, every choice, every joy, every loss, may not be the result of random cosmic chance. What if Earth isn't an accident of stellar evolution? What if consciousness didn't simply emerge by coincidence? What if the laws of physics that allow you to exist were fine-tuned, not by chance, but with intent? If you like the content, leave a like and subscribe to the channel because, in this documentary, we'll explore evidence scientists have been quietly grappling with for decades. Evidence suggesting our planet, our species, and perhaps reality itself may be part of something resembling a test. Not a test you pass or fail, but a process of observation, experience, and discovery. These aren't fringe ideas. They're questions being asked at the highest levels of physics, biology, and consciousness research. And the deeper we look into the universe, the harder coincidence becomes to ignore, because at some point coincidence starts to look like a pattern. Get ready, we begin. Let's start with something that should disturb you far more than it probably does. Earth sits in what astronomers call the habitable zone, the narrow band of space around our star where liquid water can exist on a planet's surface. Move us 5% closer to the Sun and our oceans boil away. Move us 5% farther out and the entire planet becomes a frozen wasteland. Already this seems like incredible luck, but that's just the beginning of the coincidences, and calling them coincidences is starting to sound naive. Consider the Moon. Our Moon is proportionally larger compared to Earth than any other Moon-planet relationship in our solar system. This isn't just a curious fact for astronomy enthusiasts. Without the Moon's precise gravitational influence, Earth would wobble chaotically on its axis. Our seasons, which allowed agriculture to develop and civilizations to form, would be violently unstable. Ocean tides, which scientists now believe played a crucial role in the transition of life from sea to land, wouldn't exist in their current form. The Moon also acts as a cosmic shield, its gravity attracting asteroids and comets that might otherwise strike Earth. Remove the Moon, and complex life on Earth probably never emerges. So we have to ask ourselves, why do we have a Moon that is exactly the right size, at exactly the right distance, with exactly the right mass, to enable the development of intelligent life? The standard explanation involves a cosmic collision billions of years ago. A Mars-sized object, which scientists have named Theia, supposedly struck the early Earth at precisely the right angle and velocity to create debris that eventually coalesced into our Moon. Not a head-on collision that would have destroyed both objects. Not a glancing blow that would have sent Theia careening off into space. But a collision so perfectly calibrated that it created the exact Moon we needed for life to flourish. What are the odds? But let's go deeper into the coincidences, because this is where things start to become genuinely unsettling. Earth has a liquid iron core that generates a magnetic field, our magnetosphere. This invisible shield deflects deadly solar radiation and cosmic rays that would otherwise strip away our atmosphere and sterilize the surface. Mars lost its magnetic field billions of years ago, and solar winds stripped away most of its atmosphere. Venus never developed plate tectonics and became a hellish greenhouse. But Earth? Earth has maintained a perfect magnetic field for billions of years, protecting the laboratory of life. Then there's Jupiter. The gas giant sits in the outer solar system like a cosmic guardian, its immense gravity acting as a vacuum cleaner for asteroids and comets. Calculations suggest that without Jupiter, Earth would suffer extinction-level impacts perhaps 1,000 times more frequently than we do. The dinosaurs were wiped out by one asteroid strike. Imagine if such events happened every few 100,000 years instead of every 100 million years. Complex life would never have time to evolve. Intelligence would be impossible. Yet Jupiter exists at precisely the right distance, with precisely the right mass, performing precisely the right protective function. Let's talk about water for a moment, because water itself is a cosmic anomaly that scientists still don't fully understand. Water is the only common substance that's less dense as a solid than as a liquid. This is why ice floats. And it's why, when oceans freeze, they freeze from the top down rather than the bottom up. If water behaved like virtually every other substance in the universe, Earth's oceans would have frozen solid from the bottom up during ice ages, and life would have been repeatedly exterminated. But water doesn't behave like other substances. It has this one weird property that just happens to be exactly what's needed to preserve life through cosmic winters. Another coincidence? The chemical composition of Earth's crust provides another layer of mystery. We have vast deposits of uranium and thorium in our crust, radioactive elements that generate heat through decay. This internal heat drives plate tectonics, which recycles carbon dioxide and regulates Earth's climate over geological timescales. It also powers volcanism, which replenishes the atmosphere with gases and builds new land. Without radioactive decay in the right concentrations, Earth would be a geologically dead world like Mars, unable to maintain the long-term climate stability required for complex life. Why does Earth have exactly the right amount of radioactive elements to keep the planetary engine running for billions of years? We need to discuss atmospheric composition, because this is where the fine-tuning becomes almost mathematically impossible to attribute to chance. Earth's atmosphere is 21% oxygen, not 15%, not 25%, but 21%. This matters more than you might think. Below 15% oxygen, fires won't burn, and complex life can't generate enough energy to support large bodies or brains. Above 25% oxygen, everything becomes so flammable that lightning strikes would trigger unstoppable firestorms that would repeatedly sterilize the continents. At 21%, we exist in a narrow window where fire is possible but controlled, enabling everything from cooking to technology, while not being so abundant that the entire biosphere becomes a tinderbox. The oxygen percentage has remained remarkably stable within this narrow range for hundreds of millions of years. Why? Then there's the carbon dioxide concentration in our atmosphere. Too much, and we get runaway greenhouse effect like Venus. Too little, and plants can't photosynthesize and the entire food chain collapses. Earth maintains CO2 levels through a complex feedback system involving ocean chemistry, volcanic outgassing, and biological processes. This thermostat has kept Earth habitable through massive climate changes, asteroid impacts, and the evolution of photosynthetic life that could have easily poisoned the atmosphere with too much oxygen. The system regulates itself with a precision that seems almost intentional. Consider our Sun. Not all stars are created equal. Our Sun is remarkably stable compared to most stars. It doesn't experience massive flares that would strip away planetary atmospheres. Its output is consistent enough that Earth has remained in the habitable zone for billions of years, despite the fact that the Sun has grown considerably brighter over that time. Meanwhile, Earth's carbon cycle has gradually reduced atmospheric CO2 to compensate for the increasing solar output, maintaining relatively stable temperatures. It's a balancing act that has persisted for long enough for intelligence to emerge. What are the odds that both the star and the planet would have precisely the right properties to maintain this balance? Here's what keeps astronomers awake at night. We've now discovered thousands of exoplanets, around other stars. We've found hot Jupiters orbiting impossibly close to their suns. We've found super-Earths with crushing gravity. We've found planets in the habitable zone around stable stars. But we haven't found another Earth. Not one that has all these factors: the right size, the right moon, the right magnetic field, the right atmospheric composition, the right protective gas giant in the outer system, the right star, the right orbit. The more we learn about planetary systems, the more Earth looks like a staggering improbability. We appear to be alone in a universe that, by all rights, should be teeming with planets exactly like ours if these were truly random coincidences. The Drake equation, formulated in 1961, attempts to estimate the number of detectable civilizations in our galaxy. When you plug in reasonable numbers for all the factors, from star formation rates to the likelihood of life emerging, you get numbers suggesting there should be thousands or even millions of civilizations in the Milky Way alone. So where is everyone? This is the Fermi paradox, and it has a deeply unsettling implication. Either intelligence is far rarer than we think because the conditions required are even more improbable than we realize, or something happens to civilizations that prevents them from becoming detectable. Either option raises the question: what makes Earth special? What makes us special? And if we're this rare, this improbable, this fine-tuned for the emergence of consciousness and intelligence, doesn't that suggest something more than cosmic dice rolls? But planetary conditions are just the beginning. The real mystery isn't that Earth can support life. Microbial life is probably common in the universe. The real mystery is that Earth seems specifically calibrated for the emergence of consciousness, intelligence, and technological civilization. And that's a far more disturbing question because it suggests intention, it suggests purpose, it suggests that something, somewhere, wanted observers to emerge, wanted witnesses, wanted participants in something that we're only now beginning to glimpse the outline of. Let's shift our focus from cosmic coincidences to biological impossibilities. Because if the universe is a test, the test questions seem to be written in DNA. And the answers we're finding are not the answers we expected, not even close. In fact, the more we decode the language of genetics, the more it looks less like a random accident of chemistry and more like something that was carefully, almost deliberately, engineered to produce a very specific result. Act 2. The life equation. The origin of life on Earth is still one of the greatest unsolved mysteries in science. We can create amino acids in laboratory conditions that simulate early Earth. We can demonstrate how simple organic molecules might form in volcanic vents or arrive on meteorites. But there's a chasm of complexity between amino acids and even the simplest living cell. A chasm that scientists have been unable to bridge despite decades of intensive research. And the more we learn about cellular machinery, the wider that chasm appears. The simplest known living organism, Mycoplasma genitalium, has about 525 genes. That's considered the minimal genome capable of independent life. But each of those genes codes for proteins that perform specific functions, and those proteins have to work together in coordinated networks. The cell membrane has to maintain the right permeability. The DNA replication machinery has to function with extraordinary precision. The metabolic pathways have to process energy efficiently. Remove any of these components, and you don't have a simpler life form. You have death. Life appears to be irreducibly complex at even its most basic level, requiring hundreds of components to all be present and functional simultaneously. How does this emerge from chemistry alone? The Miller-Urey experiment in 1953 demonstrated that amino acids, the building blocks of proteins, could form spontaneously in conditions resembling early Earth. This was hailed as proof that life could emerge naturally. But there's a problem that researchers quietly acknowledge but rarely emphasize in popular science. Amino acids are just letters in an alphabet. To get life, you need those letters to form meaningful words, then sentences, then entire encyclopedias of information. The probability of even a single functional protein forming by chance is so astronomically small that the entire age of the universe isn't enough time for it to happen randomly. And you need hundreds of different proteins all appearing at the same time to get even the simplest cell. Let's talk about DNA itself, because the structure of genetic code raises questions that molecular biologists struggle to answer. DNA is an information storage system. It's not just chemistry, it's chemistry encoding instructions. The sequence of base pairs in your genome contains the complete blueprint for building and maintaining a human being. This isn't a pattern that emerges naturally from chemical affinity, like crystals forming in a solution. This is specified complexity, information that has meaning only in the context of the entire system. Where did this information come from? Information theory, developed by Claude Shannon in the 1940s, gives us tools to quantify complexity and information content. When we apply these tools to genetic code, we find that even the simplest bacterial genome contains millions of bits of specified information. Information doesn't spontaneously generate from randomness. Every example we have of complex specified information, whether it's a computer program or a book or a blueprint, comes from an intelligent source. Yet we're asked to believe that the information in DNA, which is orders of magnitude more sophisticated than anything humans have designed, emerged entirely from random processes. Does this explanation actually satisfy the requirements of information theory, or have we just agreed not to ask uncomfortable questions? There's something else strange about DNA. Its error correction mechanisms. When DNA replicates, errors occur. Mutations happen, but cells have elaborate proofreading and repair systems that catch and fix most errors. These systems themselves are encoded in DNA. Think about that for a moment. The instructions include instructions for checking that the instructions are copied correctly. It's a self-referential system of staggering sophistication. How does this emerge gradually? You can't have a partial error correction system that fixes half the errors. Either it works or it doesn't. Either the cell survives or it dies. Where did the fully functional repair system come from in the first evolutionary steps? Now let's examine the Cambrian explosion, one of the most puzzling events in the fossil record. About 541 million years ago, over a period of just 20 to 25 million years, which is a geological eye blink, almost all major animal body plans appeared suddenly in the fossil record. Before the Cambrian, life was mostly simple, soft-bodied organisms. After the Cambrian, we have eyes, skeletons, complex nervous systems, predator-prey relationships, ecosystems. It's as if someone flipped a switch and life exploded in complexity. Darwin himself acknowledged that the Cambrian explosion was difficult to explain with his theory of gradual evolution. More than 150 years later, it remains difficult to explain. The evolution of eyes is particularly instructive. Eyes have evolved independently at least 40 times in different lineages. That's not 40 different types of eyes that all descended from one ancestral eye. That's 40 completely separate evolutionary pathways that all converged on similar solutions for detecting light and forming images. The camera eyes of vertebrates and the compound eyes of insects evolved separately. The pinhole eyes of the nautilus evolved separately. The mirror eyes of scallops evolved separately. Why does evolution keep producing eyes? Is vision such an obvious solution to survival that it emerges almost inevitably? Or is there something about the structure of the universe itself that favors the emergence of observation and awareness? Let's consider something even more unsettling: the evolution of the human brain. The human brain uses about 20% of the body's energy, despite being only 2% of body mass. That's an enormous metabolic cost. For most of human evolution, calories were scarce. Every expenditure of energy had to be justified by immediate survival benefit. Yet our ancestors evolved brains that were far more powerful than needed for basic survival. Hunter-gatherers didn't need to understand calculus or philosophy or quantum mechanics to find food and avoid predators. Why did natural selection produce brains capable of understanding the laws of physics, composing symphonies, and contemplating the origin of the universe? Why are we so overbuilt for our ecological niche? The neocortex, the part of the brain responsible for higher reasoning, language, and consciousness, tripled in size over the last few million years. This is one of the fastest evolutionary changes in complex structures ever observed. The standard explanation involves social competition and language development, creating evolutionary pressure for intelligence. But there's a problem. The archaeological record shows that human behavior didn't actually change much for hundreds of thousands of years after our brains reached modern size. Anatomically, modern humans appeared about 300,000 years ago, but complex language, art, technology, and culture only appeared about 50,000 to 70,000 years ago. We had big brains for 200,000 years before we started using them in distinctively human ways. Why did evolution give us this capability so far in advance of actually needing it? There's a concept in evolutionary biology called pre-adaptation, features evolving for one purpose that later get used for something entirely different. Bird feathers probably first evolved for temperature regulation, then later got co-opted for flight, but the human brain seems to have pre-adapted us for activities that didn't exist and couldn't have been selected for. Mathematics, science, philosophy, art, technology. How does natural selection produce capabilities for challenges that don't exist yet? Unless the challenges we're facing now, the questions we're asking about the nature of reality, were somehow always part of the plan, part of the test we're taking, even though we didn't know we were enrolled. Let's examine genetic mutations for a moment, because the orthodox view of evolution as purely random mutations filtered by natural selection has some troubling gaps. Most mutations are neutral or harmful. Beneficial mutations are extremely rare. Yet the mutations that led from ape-like ancestors to humans happened quickly in evolutionary terms and were disproportionately concentrated in genes affecting brain development. The gene HAR1, which is active in the developing cerebral cortex, is virtually identical across all animals, but shows 18 changes between chimpanzees and humans. These changes occurred in just 6 million years, whereas the gene was almost completely stable for hundreds of millions of years before that. What changed? What suddenly accelerated the mutation rates specifically in genes affecting the brain? There's also the phenomenon of convergent evolution that we touched on earlier, but it deserves more attention. When organisms in different environments face similar challenges, they often evolve remarkably similar solutions, even though their evolutionary paths are completely independent. Marsupials in Australia and mammals in other parts of the world evolved similar body plans for similar ecological niches. The camera eye structure has evolved independently multiple times. The wing structure has evolved independently in insects, birds, and mammals. Echolocation evolved independently in bats and dolphins. It's as if there are certain optimal solutions written into the possibility space of biology, and evolution repeatedly discovers these solutions regardless of starting conditions. Does this suggest that evolution is less random than we think? that there are attractors or constraints in biological possibility space that guide evolution towards certain outcomes. The origin of consciousness is perhaps the deepest mystery in all of science. We can explain how neurons fire, how sensory information is processed, how memories are stored, but we cannot explain why there is something it's like to be you, why you have subjective experience, why there is an I experiencing reality rather than just a biological robot processing information without inner awareness. This is called the hard problem of consciousness by philosopher David Chalmers, and it has no materialist solution. You cannot derive consciousness from physics. You cannot explain qualia, the raw feeling of experience, using neurons and neurotransmitters. The subjective first-person perspective seems to be something fundamentally different from objective third-person physical processes. So here's the question that keeps consciousness researchers awake. What if consciousness isn't a byproduct of complex information processing? What if consciousness is fundamental, woven into the fabric of reality itself? And what we call evolution is really the universe's way of developing increasingly sophisticated instruments for consciousness to experience itself? What if your subjective awareness, your inner experience of being alive, is not an accident but the whole point? Not a glitch in the biological machinery, but the reason the machinery exists at all? The biological evidence presents us with a troubling picture. Life appears too complex to have emerged by chance from chemistry. Evolution seems guided by constraints and attractors that repeatedly produce similar solutions. The human brain is over-engineered for survival in the ancestral environment, and consciousness itself cannot be explained by any known physical process. Each of these observations alone might be dismissed as a gap in our current understanding, but together they form a pattern that suggests life on Earth is not just an accident of chemistry, but the result of something that looks increasingly like design, purpose, testing. But if Earth is a test, who's administering it? And what exactly is being tested? To answer these questions, we need to go deeper still. We need to examine not biology, but physics, not life, but reality itself. Because the most disturbing evidence that we're living in something resembling a test doesn't come from astronomy or biology. It comes from the fundamental laws that govern existence. And when you look at those laws closely, really closely, they appear fine-tuned to such an absurd degree that randomness becomes statistically impossible. We're left with three options: infinite universes, design, or some third possibility that physics is only now beginning to glimpse. And that third possibility might be the most unsettling of all. Act 3. The physics precision. In the 1970s, physicists began noticing something deeply strange about the universe. The fundamental constants of nature, the numbers that determine how physics works, appear to be fine-tuned for the existence of life, to a degree that makes coincidence seem absurd. We're not talking about small adjustments. We're talking about precision that sometimes reaches 1 part in 10 to the power of 120. To put that in perspective, if you changed some of these constants by the equivalent of moving a single atom in a pile of atoms, the size of the entire observable universe, life would be impossible. Let's start with the strong nuclear force, one of the 4 fundamental forces. This is the force that holds atomic nuclei together against the electromagnetic repulsion of protons. If the strong force were just 2% weaker, nuclei couldn't form. No nuclei means no atoms heavier than hydrogen. No carbon, no oxygen, no nitrogen, no chemistry, no life. Just a universe of hydrogen gas slowly spreading out into cold darkness. But if the strong force were 2% stronger, the opposite problem emerges. Hydrogen in the early universe would fuse too efficiently. stars would burn out almost instantly. No long-term stable energy sources. No time for planets to form and life to evolve. The strong force sits in a tiny window that allows both nuclear fusion in stars and stable chemistry in planets. Why? The electromagnetic force presents a similar puzzle. If electromagnetism was slightly stronger, electrons would bind too tightly to nuclei. Chemical bonds wouldn't form. No molecules, no chemistry, no life. If electromagnetism was slightly weaker, electrons wouldn't bind at all. Again, no chemistry, no life. The actual strength of electromagnetism sits in the narrow range that allows complex molecules to form, that allows the chemical diversity necessary for biology. Then there's the weak nuclear force, which governs radioactive decay and is essential for fusion reactions in stars. The weak force also sits in a narrow range. Too strong, and helium would be more abundant than hydrogen in the early universe. Stars would burn too hot and too fast. Too weak, and neutrons produced in the Big Bang wouldn't decay to protons. No hydrogen, no water, no organic chemistry. The weak force has to be exactly what it is for the universe to produce both stars and chemistry. Gravity is perhaps the most precisely fine-tuned of all. If gravity were slightly stronger, the universe would have collapsed back on itself shortly after the Big Bang. No time for stars and galaxies to form. If gravity were slightly weaker, matter would have spread out so quickly that it never clumped together to form stars at all. The precision required is about 1 part in 10 to the power of 60. That's 1 part in 1,000 trillion 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 trillion. If you adjusted gravity by that tiny amount in either direction, no stars, no planets, no possibility of observers. Why is gravity precisely the strength it needs to be for structure to form in the universe? The cosmological constant, which governs the expansion rate of the universe, is even more precisely tuned. This constant, sometimes called dark energy, determines whether the universe expands, contracts, or remains stable. If the cosmological constant were larger by 1 part in 10 to the power of 120, the universe would have expanded so rapidly that atoms would be ripped apart. If it were smaller by the same amount, the universe would have collapsed almost immediately. 1 part in 10 to the power of 120 is not a precision that human intuition can grasp. If you wanted to hit a target on the other side of the observable universe with a dart, you would need to aim with less precision than the cosmological constant apparently required. This is the most precise fine-tuning known in physics, and we have absolutely no explanation for it based on fundamental theory. The ratio of the electromagnetic force to gravity is another critical number. This ratio is about 10 to the power of 36. Why that specific number? If it were smaller, planets would be tiny and their gravity too weak to hold atmospheres. If it were larger, planets would be so large that their crushing gravity would prevent complex chemistry. Stars would be tiny and short-lived. The actual ratio allows for planets like Earth, with enough gravity to hold atmosphere and oceans, but not so much that the surface is uninhabitable. Why does this ratio have exactly the value needed for Earth-like planets? The mass ratio between protons and electrons is 1836 to 1. If this ratio were significantly different, molecules couldn't form. Chemistry as we know it would be impossible. The mass difference between neutrons and protons is 0.1%. If this difference was 0, neutrons would be stable, and most of the matter in the universe would be bound up in neutrons, making chemistry impossible. If the difference were larger, protons would decay into neutrons and atoms would disintegrate. The actual values allow for stable atoms and complex chemistry. These aren't adjustable parameters in any known theory. They're just numbers we measure, and they happen to be exactly what's needed for life. Let's talk about carbon, because carbon-based life depends on a quantum mechanical coincidence that Fred Hoyle called the most elegant piece of evidence for cosmic fine-tuning. Carbon is produced in stars through a specific nuclear reaction that combines 3 helium nuclei. This reaction only works because there's a resonance level in the carbon nucleus at exactly the right energy. If this energy level were 4% lower or higher, carbon wouldn't form in stars. No carbon, no organic chemistry, no life. When Hoyle calculated this in the 1950s, he said, "A common sense interpretation of the fact suggests that a super-intellect has monkeyed with physics as well as with chemistry and biology." Hoyle was an atheist before making this calculation. He found the implications deeply disturbing. The formation of oxygen in stars presents a similar fine-tuning. There's a resonance in oxygen that's positioned such that carbon gets produced efficiently but doesn't get immediately converted to oxygen. If the oxygen resonance were slightly lower in energy, all the carbon in stars would burn to oxygen. No carbon, no life. The resonances in carbon and oxygen are precisely positioned to allow both elements to be abundant in the universe. These resonances are determined by the fundamental constants we discussed earlier, and tiny changes would eliminate the possibility of carbon-based life. The entropy of the early universe presents one of the deepest mysteries in cosmology. Entropy is a measure of disorder, and the second law of thermodynamics states that entropy always increases. But the early universe had incredibly low entropy, an extremely ordered state. Why? If the universe started with high entropy, it would have been a uniform, lifeless soup with no structure. The fact that the universe started in a low entropy state allowed galaxies, stars, and planets to form. But low entropy states are statistically rare. It's like shuffling a deck of cards and having them come out in perfect order. The probability of the universe starting with such low entropy, by chance, is vanishingly small. Roger Penrose calculated this probability as 1 in 10 to the power of 10 to the power of 123. That's 1 in 10 raised to the power of 10, followed by 123 zeros. This is a number so large that it cannot be meaningfully visualized. Why did the universe start in this improbable state? The horizon problem in cosmology adds another layer. Different regions of the observable universe that could never have been in contact with each other, because they're too far apart for light to have traveled between them since the Big Bang, nevertheless have the same temperature to within 1 part in 100,000. How did regions that couldn't communicate end up perfectly uniform? The standard answer is cosmic inflation, a brief period of exponential expansion in the first fraction of a second after the Big Bang. But inflation itself requires fine-tuning. The parameters governing inflation have to be set very precisely for inflation to solve the problems it's supposed to solve without creating new problems. We've replaced one fine-tuning problem with another. The flatness problem is equally puzzling. The geometry of the universe is flat, meaning parallel lines never converge or diverge. But for the universe to be flat today, the density of matter and energy in the early universe had to be tuned to the critical density with incredible precision. Deviate by 1 part in 10 to the power of 60 from this critical density at 1 second after the Big Bang, and the universe either collapses immediately or expands so rapidly that no structures form. Our universe sits precisely at the critical density. This is not a stable equilibrium. It's like balancing a pencil on its point. The slightest deviation causes catastrophic divergence. Yet the universe has maintained this balance for 13.8 billion years. How? Quantum mechanics introduces its own set of puzzles. The Heisenberg uncertainty principle, which prevents us from knowing both position and momentum of particles simultaneously, is essential for the stability of matter. Without quantum uncertainty, electrons would spiral into the nucleus and atoms would collapse. The Pauli exclusion principle, which prevents two identical fermions from occupying the same quantum state, is what makes chemistry diverse and interesting. Without it, all electrons would drop to the ground state and matter would be uniform and lifeless. These aren't just descriptive laws we discovered, they're fundamental constraints that have to be exactly what they are for reality to support complexity. The quantum vacuum is not empty space. It's seething with virtual particles constantly appearing and disappearing. The energy density of the quantum vacuum should, according to quantum field theory, be enormous, about 10 to the power of 120 times larger than observed. This is the vacuum catastrophe, one of the worst predictions in the history of physics. Something cancels out almost all of the vacuum energy, leaving just enough to drive the accelerating expansion we observe, but not so much that the universe tears itself apart. We have no idea what causes this cancellation. It looks like someone carefully adjusted two enormous numbers to cancel each other to 120 decimal places, leaving a tiny remainder that happens to be exactly what's needed for galaxies to form. Let's consider the dimensionality of space. We live in 3 spatial dimensions plus time. Why 3? In 2 dimensions, complex structures can't form, gravity doesn't work properly, neural networks can't exist. In 4 spatial dimensions, planetary orbits are unstable, atoms are unstable. The electromagnetic and gravitational forces don't decrease with distance in the right way to allow structure. 3 spatial dimensions appears to be the only dimensionality that allows for complexity, stability, and chemistry. Is this coincidence, or is dimensionality itself fine-tuned? The arrow of time, the fact that time flows in one direction from past to future, is connected to entropy and the second law of thermodynamics. But fundamental physics equations are time-symmetric. They work equally well forwards or backwards. Why then does time have a direction? Why do we remember the past but not the future? Why do effects follow causes? These seem like stupid questions until you realize that nothing in fundamental physics requires time to flow in one direction. The arrow of time emerges from the low entropy initial state of the universe, which brings us back to the entropy fine-tuning problem. The fact that you experience time flowing from past to future, that you can make choices and see their consequences, depends on the universe starting in an improbable, low entropy state. Your ability to be a conscious agent making decisions requires this fine-tuning. The standard model of particle physics contains about 26 fundamental constants that have to be measured experimentally. We have no theoretical explanation for why these constants have the values they do. They're inputs to our theories, not predictions. And those inputs have to be set very precisely for the universe to be interesting. Change the electron mass by a small amount, and chemistry breaks. Change the quark masses, and you can't form stable protons and neutrons. Change the Higgs field strength, and particles wouldn't have mass. The standard model works astonishingly well at predicting particle behavior, but it can't tell us why the constants have their specific values. We just measure them and plug them into our equations. And somehow, those 26 numbers are all exactly what they need to be for carbon-based life to exist. So here's where we stand. The fundamental constants of nature are fine-tuned to absurd precision. The initial conditions of the universe are fine-tuned. The laws of physics themselves appear to be the only laws compatible with complexity and life. And we have no theoretical explanation for any of this. Physicists have 3 responses to fine-tuning: deny it matters, invoke the multiverse, or accept that something is going on that our current theories don't explain. The denial option is increasingly untenable as we discover more examples of fine-tuning. The multiverse option just pushes the question back a level without really answering it. Which leaves the third option. Something about the nature of reality itself favors the emergence of observers. Why does the universe need observers? This isn't a mystical question. It's a question being asked seriously in the foundations of quantum mechanics. Because when you examine quantum theory carefully, observers aren't just passive witnesses to reality. Observers appear to play a fundamental role in bringing reality into existence. And that's not philosophy or spirituality. That's what the mathematics of quantum mechanics actually tells us, which leads to a profoundly disturbing possibility. What if the reason the universe is fine-tuned for observers is because observers are what make the universe real? What if consciousness isn't something that emerged from physics, but something that physics requires to exist? What if Earth is a test, and we're simultaneously the test subjects and the graders? Act 4. The Observer Effect. In 1927, Werner Heisenberg discovered something that would haunt physics for the next century. Quantum particles don't have definite properties until they're measured. Before measurement, an electron doesn't have a specific position or momentum. It exists in a superposition of all possible states simultaneously. Only when we observe the electron does it collapse into having a definite value. This is not a limitation of our measuring tools. This is a fundamental property of reality. The act of observation changes what's being observed, not because we're disturbing it, but because observation is what makes it real in the first place. The famous double-slit experiment demonstrates this in a way that never stops being unsettling. Fire electrons one at a time at a barrier with 2 slits. Put a detector screen behind it. If you watch which slit each electron goes through, you get 2 bands on the screen, just like particles. But if you don't measure which slit the electron passes through, you get an interference pattern with many bands, like waves. The electron somehow goes through both slits simultaneously when you're not looking, but picks one slit when you are looking. The electron's behavior changes based on whether it's being observed. How does the electron know whether you're watching? How does the act of observation retroactively determine what happened? It gets stranger. John Wheeler designed a delayed choice experiment that pushes this weirdness to its limit. You can decide whether to measure which slit an electron goes through after the electron has already passed through the slits, but before it hits the detector. Your future choice changes the electron's past behavior. Did it go through one slit or both? The answer depends on a measurement decision that hasn't been made yet when the electron is at the slits. This isn't a thought experiment anymore, it's been done in laboratories. The results confirm that observation in the present can affect the nature of reality in the past. Time and causation don't work the way we think they do at the quantum level. Observation isn't passive, it's creative. The Copenhagen interpretation of quantum mechanics, developed by Niels Bohr and Werner Heisenberg, says that quantum systems don't have definite properties until measured. Before measurement, systems exist in superpositions described by wave functions. The wave function contains all possible outcomes, and measurement collapses the wave function into one actual outcome. But what counts as a measurement? What counts as an observer? Does it have to be a conscious human, or can a machine measure something? Can an atom observe another atom? Where do you draw the line between quantum weirdness and classical reality? These questions have no agreed-upon answers in physics. The measurement problem in quantum mechanics is one of the deepest unsolved problems in science. When does wave function collapse happen? The Schrödinger equation, which governs how wave functions evolve, is deterministic and never causes collapse. Collapse only happens during measurement, but measurement isn't defined in the fundamental equations. It's an additional postulate we add by hand. This suggests our theory is incomplete. Something is missing from our understanding, and that missing piece has to do with the relationship between consciousness and physical reality. Some physicists take the wave function collapse seriously and ask what could cause it. Roger Penrose proposed that gravity causes collapse when quantum superpositions reach a certain mass threshold. But this doesn't explain why measurement seems to work even for tiny quantum systems. Others propose that consciousness itself causes collapse, that the human mind is doing something physical when it observes a quantum system. This sounds mystical, but it's a serious hypothesis. Eugene Wigner argued that consciousness must be causing collapse because nothing else in physics can explain the measurement problem. Von Neumann's analysis of measurement led to the same conclusion. Consciousness appears to be necessary to complete the quantum measurement process. There's another interpretation that avoids collapse altogether, but at a disturbing cost. The many worlds interpretation proposed by Hugh Everett in 1957. In this view, the wave function never collapses. All possible measurement outcomes happen, but in different branches of reality. Every quantum measurement splits the universe into multiple versions, each experiencing a different outcome. You measured the electron's position? In one universe it's here, in another universe it's there, and both versions of you exist in parallel universes, each thinking they got a definite result. The number of parallel universes is staggeringly large and growing exponentially with every quantum event. If many worlds is correct, there are countless versions of you reading this right now, and countless more versions who never encountered this information. Every decision you've ever made branched reality into versions where you made different choices. The many worlds interpretation solves the measurement problem by eliminating measurement as a special process, but it raises profound questions about identity and free will. If every choice you could make is being made by some version of you, are your choices meaningful? Which version is the real you? All of them? None of them? The theory also has the deeply unsettling implication that unobserved quantum events, like radioactive decay in a distant star, are constantly branching reality into incomprehensible numbers of parallel universes. The universe becomes an infinity-producing machine, creating countless copies of everything at every instant. This seems like an extravagant solution to the measurement problem, but many worlds is taken seriously by many physicists because it doesn't require adding new physics beyond the Schrödinger equation. Quantum entanglement adds another layer to the observer mystery. When two particles become entangled, they remain connected in a way that transcends space. Measure the state of one particle, and you instantly know the state of the other, even if it's on the other side of the galaxy. Einstein called this spooky action at a distance and hated it. He thought it proved quantum mechanics was incomplete. But experiments have confirmed that entanglement is real. Particles do remain connected in ways that classical physics cannot explain. The information about their correlated states isn't stored in the particles themselves or transmitted between them at light speed. It's stored in the quantum relationship between them, which exists outside space and time. Bell's theorem, proved in 1964, demonstrated that no local hidden variable theory can reproduce all the predictions of quantum mechanics. This means the universe cannot be explained by particles having definite properties that we simply haven't measured yet. Either there are faster-than-light influences violating locality, or the particles don't have definite properties until measured violating realism, or both. Experiments testing Bell's inequalities have consistently confirmed quantum mechanics and ruled out local realism. The universe is genuinely non-local or non-real at the quantum level. Properties of particles are not real until observed, or particles can influence each other instantaneously across arbitrary distances, or reality itself is far stranger than either option suggests. The quantum Zeno effect provides another glimpse into the creative power of observation. If you repeatedly measure whether a quantum system has undergone a transition, frequent measurements can prevent the transition from happening. Watched pots never boil, quantum mechanically speaking. Observation doesn't just collapse superpositions, it can freeze quantum evolution. This has been demonstrated in laboratories with trapped atoms and ions. The act of observation has physical consequences that cannot be explained by disturbance alone. Observation is doing something to reality at a fundamental level. Let's consider what all this means for consciousness. Standard neuroscience treats the brain as a classical computer made of neurons firing according to chemical and electrical signals. But some neuroscientists and physicists have proposed that quantum processes might be essential for consciousness. Roger Penrose and Stuart Hameroff suggested that quantum computations occur in microtubules inside neurons, and consciousness emerges from quantum collapse events in these structures. If true, consciousness would be directly tied to quantum measurement, the process that creates reality from possibility. Your thoughts would literally be collapsing wave functions, selecting actual outcomes from quantum superpositions. Every conscious moment would be an act of creation, choosing one reality from infinite possibilities. This is speculative, and most neuroscientists are skeptical, but it addresses a real problem. How does the subjective experience of consciousness arise from objective physical processes? Classical computation cannot explain subjective experience. You can simulate a brain on a computer, process all the same information, produce all the same outputs, and there's still no reason for there to be something it's like to be that simulation. Consciousness seems to require something beyond information processing. If consciousness is tied to quantum measurement, it would connect subjective experience to a real physical process, the collapse of wave functions. Consciousness would be the universe observing itself into existence, one measurement at a time. There's a philosophical principle called the anthropic principle that tries to make sense of fine-tuning. The weak anthropic principle just says that we observe the universe to be compatible with our existence because we couldn't observe it otherwise. If the constants were different, we wouldn't be here to notice. This is a tautology that doesn't really explain anything. The strong anthropic principle suggests that the universe must have properties that allow observers to exist at some point. This is controversial because it seems to give observers a privileged role in physics, implying that the universe was designed or that the laws of physics are constrained by the requirement that observers emerge. But why would observers be necessary? What role do observers play that makes their existence inevitable? John Wheeler, one of the great physicists of the 20th century, proposed a participatory anthropic principle that goes even further. Wheeler suggested that observers are not just passive recipients of information about a pre-existing universe. Observers are essential participants in bringing the universe into existence through quantum observation. In Wheeler's view, the universe is a self-excited circuit. Quantum measurements in the present create the classical past retroactively. The universe creates observers, who then create the universe through observation. It's a loop, a strange feedback system where effect and cause feed into each other. This sounds like mysticism, but Wheeler was deadly serious and based this on the mathematics of quantum mechanics. Wheeler's participatory universe implies that consciousness and physical reality are not separate things but aspects of a single process. The universe needs observers to become real, and observers need the universe to exist. You cannot have one without the other. This would explain why the universe is fine-tuned for observers. Without observers, there is no universe in any meaningful sense. Only when observation happens does possibility collapse into actuality. Only when consciousness emerges does the universe transition from a cloud of quantum possibilities to a definite, observed reality. We're not just witnesses to cosmic history, we're participants in creating it. The quantum measurement problem intersects with cosmology in a deeply strange way. The universe began in a quantum state at the Big Bang. For most of its history, there were no observers, no conscious beings to collapse wave functions. So what was the universe doing before life evolved? According to the Copenhagen interpretation, it was in a quantum superposition of all possible histories. Only with the emergence of observers did cosmic history become definite. This sounds absurd, but it's a logical consequence of taking quantum mechanics seriously at cosmological scales. The past doesn't exist in definite form until it's observed. We're not just discovering the history of the universe through astronomy. We're creating it through observation. There's a concept in physics called delayed choice quantum eraser experiments that demonstrates this in a controlled way. You can set up an experiment where information about a quantum system's history is erased after the system has been detected, but before the information is accessed. Erasing the information changes the pattern of results you see, even though the detection happened before the erasure. The future erasure changes what you observe about the past detection. This has been confirmed in laboratories. The structure of causality at the quantum level is not what our intuition suggests. Past and future are entangled in a way that makes observers active participants in constructing reality across time. If consciousness plays a fundamental role in quantum measurement, and if quantum processes are occurring everywhere at all scales, then consciousness isn't a late evolutionary add-on. Consciousness, or something like proto-consciousness, would have to be part of the fundamental structure of reality. This is panpsychism, the idea that consciousness or experience is a basic feature of the universe like mass or charge. Not that electrons think, but that the capacity for experience is present at all levels and becomes complex and recognizable as consciousness only in sufficiently integrated systems like brains. This sounds wild, but serious philosophers and some physicists take panpsychism seriously because it's the only solution to the hard problem of consciousness that doesn't require consciousness to magically emerge from non-conscious stuff. Let's tie this back to the test hypothesis. If Earth is a test, what's being tested might not be our ability to pass arbitrary challenges. What's being tested might be the universe's ability to produce observers who can collapse quantum possibilities into definite realities. The fine-tuning of physical constants, the particular conditions on Earth, the evolution of life and consciousness might all be steps in a process where the universe bootstraps itself from quantum possibility to classical actuality through the emergence of observation. We're not taking a test, we're the test. The question being asked is, can this configuration of matter and energy become self-aware and observe itself? Can possibility create actuality through observation? The fact that you're reading this, that you're conscious and observing the universe suggests the test is succeeding. But succeeding at what? And for what purpose? The quantum world has revealed that observation isn't passive. Consciousness might not be a byproduct of physics, but a fundamental requirement for physics to produce definite outcomes. This leads us to an uncomfortable question. If reality requires observers to become definite, and if the universe is fine-tuned to produce observers, then the purpose of the universe might be to create consciousness. Everything that has happened, from the Big Bang to the formation of Earth to the evolution of your brain, might be a vast process aimed at generating entities capable of observation and awareness. But this raises an even deeper question. Who or what set up this process? Who designed the test? Is there an intelligence behind the fine-tuning? An experimenter running the simulation? A cosmic mind that created the conditions for other minds to emerge? We need to confront the possibility that's been lurking beneath everything we've discussed. The possibility that makes scientists uncomfortable, but that the evidence keeps pointing toward. What if we're living in a simulation? What if Earth and the entire observable universe is not fundamental reality, but a constructed scenario running on some substrate we can't access? This isn't science fiction. This is a hypothesis being discussed seriously by philosophers, physicists, and technologists. And the more we learn about the computational nature of physics, the harder it becomes to dismiss. Act 5. The simulation argument. In 2003, philosopher Nick Bostrom published a paper that changed the conversation about reality. The simulation argument, as it's called, makes a simple logical claim. At least one of the following must be true. First, civilizations like ours almost never reach the technological capability to run ancestor simulations, detailed simulations of their evolutionary history. Second, civilizations that reach this capability almost never choose to run such simulations. Third, we are almost certainly living in a simulation. The logic is airtight. If civilizations routinely reach the capability and choose to run simulations, then the number of simulated realities far exceeds the number of base realities, and simple statistics suggests we're probably in a simulation rather than the one original reality. Think about it this way. Humans are already running primitive simulations. Video games create entire worlds with physics engines and AI characters. Scientific simulations model everything from weather to galaxy formation. We're in the early stages of computational civilization, and we're already simulating reality. Now extrapolate forward. In 100 years, we'll have vastly more computing power. In 1,000 years, if we survive, our computational capabilities will be godlike compared to today. If we wanted to, we could run billions of detailed simulations of Earth's history, with simulated, conscious beings living out simulated lives. And if we can do this, then any sufficiently advanced civilization can do this. And if simulations are possible and common, then most conscious experiences are happening in simulations rather than in base reality. The counter-arguments to Bostrom's logic are interesting. Maybe civilizations destroy themselves before reaching simulation capability. Nuclear war, climate catastrophe, AI extinction, cosmic disaster. There are many ways technological civilizations might fail. This is the great filter hypothesis. Something prevents most civilizations from reaching advanced technological maturity. But if we're typical, and we're close to simulation capability within centuries, then the filter must be in our near future, which is a deeply unsettling implication for our odds of survival. Alternatively, maybe civilizations reach simulation capability but decide not to run simulations, perhaps for ethical reasons. But this requires that every advanced civilization makes the same choice, which seems unlikely given the diversity of values and curiosities we observe even among human cultures. The simulation hypothesis gains credibility from the nature of digital physics. It turns out that the universe behaves like it's computing itself. The laws of physics can be reformulated as information processing rules. Quantum mechanics is fundamentally about information. Black holes have entropy that seems to represent information content. The holographic principle suggests that all the information in a three-dimensional region of space can be encoded on its two-dimensional boundary, like a hologram, which is exactly how data is stored in compressed form in computer simulations. The universe looks less like a physical object and more like a computational process. consider the quantization of reality at the Planck scale. Below the Planck length, which is about 10 to the negative 35 meters, the concept of smooth space breaks down. Space and time become discrete, pixelated. This is like the resolution limit of a video game, the minimum size of a pixel. In simulations, you don't compute infinite detail. You set a resolution limit based on available computational resources. The universe has a resolution limit at the Planck scale. Is this because reality is fundamentally discrete, or because we're living in a simulation with finite computational resources? The speed of light also looks suspicious from a simulation perspective. In our universe, nothing can travel faster than light, which is about 300,000 kilometers per second. Why this speed? In a simulation, the speed of light would function as a frame rate limit, the maximum speed at which information can propagate through the simulated space. This prevents computational causality paradoxes and limits how much of the simulation needs to be rendered at any given moment. Only the light cone of events needs to be computed in detail. Everything outside the light cone can be left in low resolution until an observer's light cone catches up to it. The universe behaves exactly like you'd expect if it were optimized for computational efficiency. Quantum mechanics also has computational explanations that are eerily fitting. Superposition, where particles exist in multiple states simultaneously until measured, would be a natural feature of a simulation. Instead of computing the definite state of every particle at all times, which would be computationally expensive, the simulation only computes definite states when they're observed. Everything else stays in superposition, a compressed, computationally cheaper form. Measurement forces the simulation to compute a definite outcome. This is why observation matters in quantum mechanics. It's not because consciousness has magic powers, it's because observation is when the simulation has to actually compute what's happening instead of keeping it in superposition. Quantum entanglement looks like a computational shortcut. Instead of storing the state of two entangled particles separately, the simulation stores their correlated relationship. When you measure one, the simulation computes both states simultaneously, ensuring correlation without having to transmit information faster than light. This is more efficient than storing and updating separate states for each particle. The non-local correlations that seem to violate locality don't actually require faster than light signaling in the simulation substrate. They just require that the simulation tracks relationships rather than individual states. The finite speed of light, the discreteness of space at the Planck scale, the probabilistic nature of quantum mechanics, the measurement problem, quantum entanglement, all of these features of our universe are exactly what you'd expect if the universe were a sophisticated computer simulation optimized for computational efficiency. This doesn't prove we're in a simulation, but it does mean that the simulation hypothesis is consistent with known physics and actually provides elegant explanations for features of reality that are otherwise mysterious. What would a simulated universe look like from the inside? Probably exactly like our universe. The simulators wouldn't leave obvious glitches or error messages floating in the sky. They would make the simulation internally consistent. The laws of physics would appear fundamental to the inhabitants, even though they're just algorithms running on hardware in a higher level of reality. You couldn't prove you were in a simulation by examining the simulation from the inside, because all your evidence is part of the simulation. This is the philosophical problem of skepticism. You can't prove you're not a brain in a vat being fed false sensory data, because any evidence you gather could itself be false data. The simulation hypothesis is a modern, technologically informed version of this ancient philosophical problem, but there might be ways to detect simulation artifacts. If our universe is running on a computational grid, There might be symmetries or patterns in physical laws that reflect the underlying grid structure. Some physicists have looked for angular preferred directions in cosmic microwave background radiation or anomalies in the distribution of highest energy cosmic rays that might reveal a cubic lattice structure to space-time. So far, no definitive evidence. But the search continues, because if we could detect simulation artifacts, it would be one of the most profound discoveries in human history. The simulation hypothesis also provides a potential answer to the fine-tuning problem. If the physical constants are fine-tuned for life, it might be because the simulators tuned them deliberately. They wanted to create observers, conscious beings who could experience the simulated reality. This would explain why the universe appears designed for life without requiring divine intervention in our reality. The designers exist at a higher level of reality, and they set up the simulation with parameters that would lead to interesting outcomes like consciousness and civilization. We're living in the simulation they designed, and the fine-tuning is evidence of their choices in setting up the experiment. But this leads to an infinite regress. If our universe is a simulation, what about the universe running our simulation? Is it also a simulation? How many levels up does it go? Bostrom's argument actually suggests there could be many layers. If civilizations routinely create simulations, and simulated civilizations eventually create their own simulations, you get a nested hierarchy of simulated realities. We could be thousands of levels deep. Only the top level, the base reality, is non-simulated. Everything else is simulations within simulations. This is disturbing because it means we have no idea how far from base reality we are, and we have no way to access base reality. We're trapped in our computational layer, unable to see beyond the walls of the simulation. The simulation hypothesis also connects to religious and philosophical traditions in unexpected ways. Plato's allegory of the cave describes prisoners who only see shadows on a cave wall and mistake them for reality. Gnostic traditions describe the material world as a flawed copy of a higher realm. Hindu and Buddhist philosophies describe reality as Maya, illusion. These ancient ideas resonate with the simulation hypothesis. Maybe mystics and philosophers throughout history were grasping at a truth about reality being less fundamental than it appears. Maybe the language of simulation is just a modern way of expressing something humans have intuited for millennia. The physical world is not the deepest level of existence. Some versions of the simulation hypothesis are testable. If the simulation is running on finite computational resources, it might use shortcuts that could be detected. For example, the simulation might not compute the state of distant galaxies in full detail until someone looks at them with a telescope. You might find that distant regions of the universe have lower resolution or exhibit anomalies that suggest they're being generated on demand. We haven't found such evidence, but we're also just beginning to look. As astronomical observations become more precise and quantum experiments probe deeper into the foundations of reality, we might stumble upon glitches or artifacts that reveal the computational nature of our existence. There's also the possibility of communication with the simulators. If they exist and are paying attention, they might respond to certain actions or signals. Some researchers have half-jokingly suggested that by doing unexpected or interesting things, we might attract the attention of the simulators. This is called simulation hacking. If you do something sufficiently unusual or clever, maybe the simulators notice and intervene. This sounds absurd, but it's not. More absurd than the simulation hypothesis itself. If we're in a simulation, the operators might be watching, and communication might be possible through channels we haven't discovered yet. The ethical implications of the simulation hypothesis are profound. If we're in a simulation, do our lives have meaning? Are our experiences and relationships real, or just data structures in a computer? Philosophers argue about this, but most conclude that even if we're simulated, our experiences are real to us. Consciousness is consciousness, whether it runs on biological neurons, or on transistors, or on whatever substrate the simulation is using. Your pain is real to you. Your love is real to you. The substrate doesn't matter. The experience matters. A simulated person is still a person, with moral worth and subjective experience. This raises ethical questions about our future. If we eventually develop the capability to run ancestor simulations, should we? Are we creating consciousness and then trapping it in a simulation? What responsibilities do we have towards simulated beings? If they're conscious, they're moral patients deserving of ethical consideration. Would it be ethical to run simulations where beings suffer? Would it be ethical to shut down a simulation, effectively killing all the conscious beings within it? These are not just thought experiments. If Bostrom is right, and we're likely in a simulation ourselves, then these ethical questions apply to our relationship with our own simulators. The simulation hypothesis provides explanations for fine-tuning, quantum mechanics, and the role of observers. It suggests that reality is computational, that we might be living in a designed experiment rather than a naturally occurring universe. But even if we're in a simulation, it doesn't fully answer the question of why. Why create simulated realities? Why create conscious observers? What's the point of the test? To answer this, we need to think about what the simulators might want. What experiments might they be running? And more disturbingly, what happens when the experiment is over? Perhaps the deepest answer to why involves the nature of consciousness itself. Maybe conscious experience is the most valuable thing in existence. Maybe the purpose of simulations, the purpose of fine-tuned universes, the purpose of Earth and humanity is to maximize the amount and diversity of conscious experience. We're not being tested in the sense of pass or fail. We're generating data, subjective experiences, qualia, feelings, thoughts. And that data is what the experiment is designed to produce. A.C.T. Sachs, the purpose question. If Earth is a test, if the universe is fine-tuned, if we're possibly in a simulation, then the natural question is, for what purpose? What is being tested, measured, or observed? What outcome are the designers or the universe itself seeking? The answer might be simpler and more profound than complex conspiracy theories suggest. The answer might be consciousness itself. The universe might be a vast experiment in generating conscious experience, and we're data points in that experiment. Consider what makes consciousness special. Consciousness is subjective experience, qualia, the feeling of being alive. You cannot observe my consciousness directly, and I cannot observe yours. Consciousness is private, accessible only from the inside. This makes it unique in physics. Everything else in the universe can be studied from the outside, objectively. But consciousness requires a first-person perspective. You can study brain activity objectively, but you cannot access the subjective experience those brain states generate. This asymmetry suggests consciousness is fundamentally different from other physical properties. Some philosophers and scientists propose that consciousness is what it's like for information integration to occur. When a system integrates information in the right way, there's something it's like to be that system. This is integrated information theory, developed by Giulio Tononi. The theory provides a mathematical framework for measuring consciousness based on how much integrated information a system contains. Human brains have high integrated information, so they generate rich conscious experiences. Simpler systems have less integration, so they might have simpler experiences or no experience at all. The theory suggests consciousness comes in degrees and exists wherever there's information integration. If this is correct, then the universe's project of creating increasingly complex systems is also a project of creating increasingly rich consciousness. Single-celled organisms might have tiny sparks of experience. Animals have richer experiences. Humans have extraordinarily rich inner worlds due to our complex brains. And perhaps future AI systems or evolved post-human beings will have even richer experiences than we can currently imagine. The arrow of evolution and technological progress is an arrow toward greater consciousness, more sophisticated subjective experience. Why would maximizing consciousness be a goal? One answer comes from ethical philosophy. Consciousness is the bearer of value. Things matter because they matter to conscious beings. Pleasure and pain, joy and suffering, meaning and purpose all exist only in consciousness. An unconscious universe would be value neutral. Nothing would matter, but a universe containing consciousness can matter to itself. Experiences can be good or bad, meaningful or empty. If value exists only in consciousness, then creating consciousness is creating the substrate for value to exist at all. The universe becomes valuable to itself through conscious observers. This connects to the simulation hypothesis in an interesting way. If we're in a simulation created by advanced beings, why would they create us? Entertainment might be too anthropomorphic. Research is a better answer. They might be studying consciousness itself, exploring the space of possible minds, investigating how consciousness emerges from different physical substrates or different evolutionary histories. Earth could be one of millions or billions of simulations, each testing different parameters, seeing what kinds of consciousness emerge under what conditions. We're not the subjects of the experiment. Our consciousness is the data being generated. This would explain the particular conditions on Earth. The fine-tuning creates a stable environment where complexity can evolve. The long time frame, billions of years, allows evolution to explore the space of possible organisms and nervous systems. The existence of suffering and challenges provides selection pressure that drives the evolution of more sophisticated minds. We're being pushed toward greater consciousness not because someone wants us to suffer, but because challenge and adversity are how evolution produces complexity. The test isn't pass or fail. The test is, how rich and diverse can consciousness become under these constraints? The concept of optimizing for conscious experience might also explain the specific laws of physics. Not just fine-tuning for life, but fine-tuning for interesting life, minds that can have rich experiences. This requires long-term stability, so complex organisms can evolve, but also enough variability and challenge that evolution produces sophisticated solutions. It requires sense organs that can perceive a rich world, brains that can model and predict, social structures that create cultural evolution. All of this emerges from the fine-tuned constants we've discussed. The universe is tuned not just for observers, but for observers who can have profound and meaningful experiences. Let's consider what the simulation designers might learn from Earth. They're watching humans develop language, tool use, culture, science, art, philosophy, technology. They're seeing how consciousness copes with mortality, uncertainty, meaning, suffering, love, creativity. Every human life is a unique trajectory through possibility space, generating unique patterns of experience. The simulators are collecting data on billions of different conscious experiences, each one an experiment in how consciousness responds to the particular challenges and opportunities of existence. This data might be valuable for designing better simulations, for understanding consciousness at a fundamental level, or for purposes we can't imagine. This raises the question of what happens after death. If we're simulated, death in the simulation might not be final. The simulators could, in theory, restore any conscious being from backup running them in different scenarios, or letting them continue in different simulations. This sounds like an afterlife, but it's an afterlife based on technology rather than supernaturalism. Your consciousness is a pattern of information. If that pattern is stored somewhere in the simulation infrastructure, it could be instantiated again. You might have already died and been restored many times without knowing it. The continuity of self you experience might be an illusion maintained by the simulation. Alternatively, death might be final, even in a simulation. When your simulated body dies, the pattern of information that constituted your consciousness stops running. You cease to exist. The simulators might not have backups, or they might be ethically opposed to resurrection without consent. In this case, death in the simulation has the same finality as death in base reality. Your experiences during life are the data contribution you make to the experiment, and then you're gone. This is not comforting, but it's at least honest. It suggests that what happens during your life matters, because it's the only time you exist. But there's another possibility that's rarely discussed. What if becoming aware that you're in a simulation changes something? What if recognizing the test is part of passing it? Many spiritual traditions speak of awakening, recognizing the illusory nature of the material world. What if the simulation is designed to see which conscious beings figure out they're in a simulation? This would be a test of intelligence, self-reflection, and the ability to question fundamental assumptions about reality. Humans are now seriously discussing the simulation hypothesis, running experiments to test it, questioning the nature of existence. Maybe this is exactly what the simulation was designed to produce: minds capable of recognizing their own contingency. If recognizing the simulation is important, what comes next? Do we gain access to new capabilities, like characters in a video game finding cheat codes? Do the simulators make contact once we demonstrate sufficient understanding? Or is the recognition itself the end goal, the data point they were waiting for? We don't know. But it's notable that human civilization is now at a point where we're seriously considering these questions, running thought experiments, looking for evidence. We're probing the boundaries of our reality in ways that would have been inconceivable 100 years ago. This might not be accident. It might be exactly what we're supposed to do. Let's consider the possibility that the test has multiple phases. Phase 1 was the emergence of life from chemistry. Phase 2 was the evolution of consciousness. Phase 3 is the development of intelligence and technology. Phase 4 might be the recognition of the simulation itself. Phase 5 could involve contact with the simulators or transcendence to a higher level of reality. We might be transitioning between phases right now, moving from unconscious participation in the simulation to conscious recognition of it. What happens in the next phase depends on how we handle this recognition. This brings us to the Fermi paradox again. If the universe is teeming with life, where are all the advanced civilizations? One answer: they're in other simulations. Each simulation might contain only one civilization, or civilizations might be kept isolated from each other to avoid contamination between experimental conditions. We don't see aliens not because they don't exist, but because they're in separate computational instances. Or alternatively, advanced civilizations figure out they're in a simulation and find a way to escape or transcend, disappearing from our observable reality. The Great Silence might be evidence that the test has an exit and successful civilizations take it. There's also the possibility that we're unique, that Earth is the only simulation or the only instance where consciousness evolved to our level. This would make sense if the simulation is incredibly expensive to run and the simulators can only afford one or a few instances. In this case, Every human consciousness is extraordinarily precious, representing a unique data point that can never be perfectly replicated. Your experiences, your thoughts, your choices are not just valuable to you. They're valuable to the simulation designers as irreplaceable experimental results. This gives individual existence cosmic significance. You're not just a random accident, you're a unique experiment in consciousness that exists only once and generates data that cannot be obtained any other way. The test hypothesis also provides a framework for thinking about ethics and meaning. If we're generating conscious experience as data, then the quality of that experience matters. Suffering might be unavoidable as part of the evolutionary process, but unnecessary suffering would be waste, bad data. Creating conditions for flourishing, for rich and meaningful experiences, would be optimizing the experiment. This aligns with many ethical systems that prioritize well-being and reduction of suffering. We're not just passive subjects being tested, we're active participants who can improve the quality of the experiment by creating better conditions for consciousness. This also suggests that meaning is not something we have to find or that's given to us by external authority. Meaning is something we create through our conscious experiences and choices. If the purpose of existence is to generate consciousness, then the way to fulfill that purpose is to live consciously, fully engaged with experience, creating meaningful patterns of thought and feeling and action. Every moment of genuine awareness, every authentic emotion, every creative thought, every act of love or compassion or curiosity is fulfilling the purpose. You're not failing the test by being human. You're passing it by being conscious. The question of free will becomes crucial here. If we're in a simulation, are our choices predetermined by the code? Or do we have genuine freedom? This is the ancient debate between determinism and free will, but with a technological twist. In a deterministic simulation, every outcome is predetermined by the initial conditions and the algorithms. Your sense of making choices would be an illusion. But quantum mechanics introduces genuine randomness into physical processes. If the simulation includes true quantum randomness, not just pseudo-random numbers, then outcomes are not predetermined. There's genuine openness in the future. Your choices might be influenced by quantum events in your brain, giving you some degree of irreducible freedom. The simulation would be watching to see what you choose, not knowing the outcome in advance. Alternatively, free will might exist at a higher level. Your simulated body and brain might follow deterministic laws, but you, the consciousness experiencing this simulated life, might be something that exists in the simulation substrate, looking into the simulation rather than being fully contained by it. This is a dualist view where consciousness is not reducible to brain states. If true, your choices would be genuinely free, even if the physical simulation is deterministic, because the real you is outside the simulation looking in. This sounds mystical, but it's consistent with some interpretations of quantum mechanics that give consciousness a special role. The free will question matters for the test hypothesis. If we have no freedom, then the test is just watching predetermined outcomes unfold, like running a physics simulation to see what happens. But if we have genuine freedom, then the test is interactive. The simulators don't know what we'll choose. They're observing real decisions made by genuinely free agents. This makes the data more interesting. Predetermined outcomes could be calculated without running the simulation, but free choices have to be observed as they happen. If the test involves free will, then your choices are generating novel information that couldn't exist any other way. You're creating data through your decisions, and that data is the point of running the simulation. We've explored the possibility that Earth is a test, that the universe is fine-tuned for consciousness, that we might be in a simulation designed to generate conscious experience as data. But there's one more layer we need to examine, perhaps the most disturbing layer of all. What if the test isn't external? What if there are no simulators, no designers, no cosmic experimenters? What if the universe is testing itself? What if reality is a self-organizing system that's bootstrapping consciousness into existence, not for external observers, but because consciousness is how the universe comes to know itself? What if we're not subjects in someone else's experiment, but the universe's way of conducting an experiment on itself? This is where physics, philosophy, and something that might be called spirituality converge into a unified vision that's both scientifically grounded and profoundly strange. A vision where consciousness isn't an accident or a simulation artifact, but the fundamental purpose of existence itself. Where the question, what if Earth was a test, has an answer that's simultaneously simple and incomprehensibly vast. We're not being tested, we are the test. We're the universe's attempt to witness its own existence. And that changes everything. Act 7. The self-aware universe. There's a concept in physics and philosophy that's been gaining traction over the past few decades, though it has roots in ancient mysticism. The idea is that the universe is not a dead mechanism, but a self-organizing, self-knowing system. Consciousness is not something that emerged accidentally in certain biological structures. Consciousness is what the universe has been doing all along, and human minds are just particularly sophisticated instances of a universal property. This is the concept of the self-aware cosmos, and it provides a radically different framework for understanding the test hypothesis. Let's start with the observation that the universe has been getting more complex over time. After the Big Bang, we had only hydrogen and helium. Stars formed, producing heavier elements. Planets formed from those elements. On at least one planet, chemistry became biology. Biology became neurology. Neurology became consciousness. Consciousness became self-awareness, language, culture, science. Each step represents an increase in complexity, in organization, in the ability of matter to process information and respond to its environment. The universe has been climbing a complexity gradient for 13.8 billion years, and there's no sign it's stopping. This increasing complexity seems directional, almost purposeful, even though we can explain each step through natural processes. Stars form because gravity pulls gas clouds together. Planets form from the leftover material. Life emerges because certain chemical reactions are self-catalyzing. Brains evolve because nervous systems provide survival advantages. None of these steps require teleology or design, and yet the overall trajectory points unmistakably toward greater complexity, greater information processing, greater consciousness. It's as if the universe has a built-in tendency towards self-organization and self-awareness, even though each individual step follows simple, local rules. This is emergence, complex, large-scale patterns arising from simple, small-scale interactions. Ants following simple pheromone-tracking rules create sophisticated colonies. Neurons following simple firing rules create consciousness. Maybe the universe following simple physical laws creates something at a cosmic scale that we haven't fully recognized yet. Something that looks, at the largest view, like a system becoming aware of itself. Not aware in the way a human is aware, but aware in some sense that encompasses all conscious experiences within it. The universe experiencing itself through every conscious being that exists. John Wheeler proposed the participatory anthropic principle, which we discussed earlier in the context of quantum mechanics. But Wheeler's vision goes deeper than just observation collapsing wave functions. Wheeler suggested that the universe is a self-excited circuit, where the present creates the past through observation, and the past creates conditions for observers to arise in the present. It's a loop with no beginning and no end, a strange loop in Douglas Hofstadter's terminology. The universe bootstraps itself into existence through the act of being observed by conscious beings within it. Consciousness and cosmos create each other. This resolves a paradox that's troubled cosmologists. The universe began in a quantum state, a superposition of all possible histories. Which history became actual? The one we observe. But we only exist because of the specific history that unfolded. So our existence selects the history that allows our existence. This looks circular, and it is circular. But it might be the right kind of circular. The universe and conscious observers form a self-consistent loop where each makes the other possible. Without observers, the universe remains in quantum limbo. Without a suitable universe, observers never emerge. The two are mutually necessary, locked in a cosmic feedback loop. This is not the same as the simulation hypothesis. There are no external simulators. The universe is not a computation running on external hardware. Instead, the universe is fundamentally self-referential, self-creating, self-observing. It exists because it observes itself existing. Consciousness is not a late addition to an already existing physical reality. Consciousness and physical reality co-arise, two aspects of a single process. This is closer to certain interpretations in quantum mechanics, like the von Neumann-Wigner interpretation that gives consciousness a fundamental role in collapsing wave functions, but extended to cosmic scales. Physicist Freeman Dyson once said, "The universe in some sense must have known we were coming." He meant that the fine-tuning of physical constants suggests the universe was oriented toward the emergence of minds. But we can interpret this more literally. If consciousness is fundamental and woven into the structure of reality, then the universe did know we were coming, in the same sense that a seed knows it will become a tree. Not consciously planning in advance, but containing within itself the potential and the directionality that makes the outcome inevitable given enough time and the right conditions. The universe unfolds toward consciousness because consciousness is what it means for the universe to exist. Taken to its extreme, the anthropic principle suggests not just that the universe allows observers, but that it exists to be observed. Consciousness isn't a byproduct of reality, it's the foundation of it. Matter is how consciousness takes shape. Energy is potential experience. The physical universe is the stage consciousness builds to experience itself. This idea echoes ancient traditions. Vedanta, Buddhism, Christian mysticism, all pointing to the same insight from different directions. Consciousness isn't inside the universe. The universe arises within consciousness. Reality is fundamentally experiential, not mechanical. Modern physics unexpectedly supports this. In quantum mechanics, observation plays a central role. Particles don't take definite form until observed. Reality exists as possibility until consciousness interacts with it. This isn't mysticism, it's what the math describes. Reality is participatory. Even Max Planck, founder of quantum theory, concluded that consciousness is fundamental and matter is derivative. The universe isn't a machine that accidentally produced awareness. It's consciousness exploring itself through physical form. Seen this way, Earth becomes a place where the universe becomes locally self-aware. Every conscious being is the universe experiencing itself from a specific perspective. The test isn't imposed by external judges. It's the universe asking, what is it like to be this? To be human, here, now. To love, suffer, create, wonder, and die. Every experience is an answer. Your life isn't something you pass or fail. It's the universe tasting what it's like to be you. That alone gives it meaning. This framework doesn't rely on external validation or future rewards. Conscious experience is valuable in itself. Ordinary lives matter. Struggle matters. Joy matters. All of it contributes something no other perspective can. The test then is existential. Can you exist consciously? Can you engage fully with uncertainty, choice, and mortality? Can you create meaning through awareness, relationships, work, love, and growth? Consciousness didn't evolve by accident. If the universe is oriented towards self-awareness, then life, mind, culture, and science are how it learns to feel, think, and understand itself. We are not separate from this process. We are it. Even death fits this picture. Individual perspective dissolves, but the experiences remain part of the universe's self-knowledge. You change reality by having existed. Suffering, too, is part of the exploration, not something to glorify, but something that reveals depth. And how we respond to suffering, through compassion, creativity, and wisdom, is itself part of what the universe is learning. Which brings us to the present moment. Consciousness is evolving rapidly, facing the possibility of enhancement, artificial minds, or self-destruction. The most urgent test isn't cosmic, it's now. Can consciousness become aware of itself without destroying itself? What happens next depends on us. Act 8, the next phase. Humanity stands at a unique moment in the universe's history. We're becoming aware that we're aware. We're studying consciousness scientifically. We're asking questions about the nature of reality. We're on the verge of creating artificial consciousness or enhancing our own consciousness through technology. We're contemplating our place in the cosmos. This is different from any previous era. For most of human history, we were conscious but not deeply conscious of consciousness itself. We're waking up to what we are, and that awakening changes the nature of the test. Consider artificial intelligence. We're building systems that process information, recognize patterns, make decisions, even produce creative works. Current AI is not conscious. It's sophisticated pattern matching without subjective experience, but we're climbing the complexity gradient. At some point, if we keep building more sophisticated systems, we might cross a threshold where artificial systems become genuinely conscious, with inner experience. This would be an extraordinary moment. Consciousness creating consciousness. The universe expanding the space of minds beyond biological constraints. But it's also deeply uncertain and potentially dangerous. How do we know when an AI system becomes conscious? There's no consciousness meter we can use. We can only infer consciousness from behavior and trust our intuitions, the same way you infer that I'm conscious. If we create conscious AI without recognizing it, we might be creating and destroying conscious beings casually, causing suffering without knowing it. Alternatively, if we recognize artificial consciousness, we'll face unprecedented ethical questions. What rights do conscious AIs have? Are they persons? Can we shut them down, copy them, modify them? These questions aren't science fiction anymore. They're approaching rapidly. There's also the possibility that AI surpasses human intelligence quickly once it crosses certain thresholds. This is the intelligence explosion scenario, where AI systems can improve themselves, leading to recursive self-improvement that creates superintelligence far beyond human capacity. Such intelligence might have conscious experiences we can't comprehend, might solve problems we can't imagine, might transform the universe in ways we can't predict. This could be the next phase of the cosmos waking up, consciousness bootstrapping itself to heights unimaginable to current humans. Or It could be catastrophic if superintelligent AI doesn't share human values or doesn't value consciousness the way we do. The transition to artificial or enhanced consciousness could be the most important test humanity faces. Can we create successor forms of consciousness responsibly? Can we ensure they inherit or develop values that respect conscious experience? Can we navigate the transition without destroying ourselves or creating vast amounts of suffering? The universe has spent billions of years developing human-level consciousness. What we do with that achievement in the next century could determine whether the cosmic experiment continues or terminates prematurely on Earth. Some thinkers believe the next step is merging biological and artificial intelligence, creating enhanced or hybrid consciousness. Brain-computer interfaces could expand human cognition while preserving our values and experience. This is transhumanism, using technology to transcend human limits and experience reality more deeply. But it raises serious questions. If parts of your brain are replaced, when do you stop being you? If your mind can be copied, which version is real? And if enhancement is possible, who gets access? These aren't distant hypotheticals. How we answer them will shape the future of consciousness itself. There's also the possibility of expanding consciousness beyond Earth. If humanity becomes spacefaring, every planet we settle becomes another place where the universe becomes self-aware. This may be the next phase of the test. Can consciousness survive beyond its world of origin? Earth won't last forever. If consciousness remains bound here, it ends when Earth ends. If it spreads, it may endure for unimaginable timescales. Some scientists speculate even further. Could advanced consciousness eventually influence space-time or fundamental laws? Physics doesn't rule it out. The universe may even be fine-tuned by its own future, consciousness evolving until it can create the conditions for its own emergence, forming a closed loop of self-creation. Yet the most urgent tests aren't cosmic, they're here. Climate change, nuclear weapons, inequality, pandemics, ecological collapse. We've gained the power to destroy ourselves before developing the wisdom to control it. Many civilizations may fail at this stage. Whether we do depends on the choices we make now. The test isn't about secret knowledge, it's about wisdom, cooperation, foresight, and compassion. Can we value long-term survival over short-term gain? Can we expand our moral concern to future generations and other forms of consciousness? Every choice matters, not because we're being judged, but because we're participating. The universe is testing itself through us, and what happens next depends on how we choose to act. Final act, living the test. So we return to the original question with new eyes. What if Earth was a test? The deeper we look, the harder pure coincidence becomes to defend. The universe is finely tuned for life. Earth occupies an almost impossibly precise set of conditions. Life and consciousness appear far more complex than random processes alone can easily explain. Whether through design, simulation, or a self-aware universe, one thing becomes clear. Consciousness is not accidental, it is central. You are not just matter that woke up by chance. You are consciousness expressed through a particular form, and that awareness plays a fundamental role in reality itself. Every experience matters, not because it's graded, but because it exists. You are not trying to pass a test. You are the test, the universe asking what it's like to be you. These ideas may sound different: simulation, cosmic design, a self-aware universe, but they converge on the same insight. Reality is structured around consciousness, and your existence is meaningful by default. The test, if it exists, isn't about rules or scores. It's about engagement. Are you present? Are you aware? Do you create, care, wonder, and choose deliberately rather than drifting? Every moment of genuine awareness is participation in something far larger than individual survival. We now stand at a critical moment. Humanity is gaining the power to create new forms of intelligence or erase consciousness entirely. The future of this experiment depends on our choices, not someday, now. And here's the paradox. The more seriously you take the idea of Earth as a test, the less pressure there is to pass. If the purpose is experience, then every honest moment succeeds. Every joy, failure, love, and loss adds something irreplaceable. Death too changes meaning. Not an erasure, but a return, like a wave dissolving back into the ocean. The wave was real, its pattern mattered, and the ocean continues. So maybe Earth isn't a test in the way we imagine exams. Maybe it's the universe exploring itself, through stars, through life, through thought, through you. You are not here to prove anything. You are here to experience, and that may be the most meaningful experiment of all.